Vedika Sood in New Delhi, and this is CNN.
The bears are back. Losses across all three major indices on Monday. The S&P 500 and the Nasdaq are down more than 3%. Those are the markets, and these are the main events. Wall Street is all nerves as investors wait for the Fed to make a move on Wednesday. Bitcoin prices crater after two major crypto platforms restrict transactions. Tasty, and that's it. Russia's former McDonald's locations reopen with a new brand and new ownership. Coming to you live from New York, it is Monday, June 13th. I'm Zain Asher, and this is Quest Means Business. Good evening. Tonight, an accelerating stock sell-off on Wall Street. Markets plunge into bear market territory as economic concerns grow. The Dow is down by almost 800 points, 760 points or so. This is Friday's inflation data spurs fears of a higher than expected interest rate hike this week. The S&P 500 is down over 3% and more than 20% off its January record highs. That puts it on track to close in a bear market. The Nasdaq, which is already in a bear market, also down over 3.5% as well. The sell-off comes amid growing concerns over central bankers' abilities to engineer a soft landing here. The UK economy unexpectedly shrank in April. The yield curve in the US briefly inverted. Historically, this indicates an upcoming economic downturn or possible recession. And a new poll from the Financial Times shows that 70% of economists right now think that the US will tip into recession. Mark Zandi is chief economist at Moody's Analytics. He joins us live now. Mark, thank you so much for being with us. So the big concern here when it comes to stocks are down about 800 points or so in terms of the Dow. The big concern is really what lengths the Fed is going to go to at this point to curb inflation.
Well, they're going to raise rates. It's just a question of how much and when. They meet this week. My sense is they'll raise rates a half a point. That's what they've been signaling to us for quite some time. I think they stick to script. But as you pointed out, there are a lot of investors out there thinking, given the really ugly inflation numbers we got last Friday, that the Fed's going to be even more aggressive and raise rates by 0.75 percentage point. I don't think they'll do that. I think they've got concerns about the economy and recession, so they won't go that far. But they're going to, put out a strong statement because they want to make sure everyone believes that inflation is going to come back down in the not too distant future.
Yeah, 0.75 is too risky. That's what a lot of people are saying, especially given the concerns right now about a recession. What is your expectation about the U.S. going into recession here? Do you anticipate a recession? And if so, how deep do you think a possible recession could be?
Well, I think recession risks are uncomfortably high, and obviously they've been rising. But I think we'll be able to make our way through without actually suffering an economic downturn. It's going to feel uncomfortable at times, like today when we're seeing all this red on the screen, with the stock market. But I think we'll navigate our way through. The economy's fundamentals, it's balance sheet, household debt, corporate leverage, the financial systems, strength, state and local governments, all in pretty good shape. So, I would argue that we'll be able to avoid a recession. But if I'm wrong and we actually do go in, then all those things I just said would argue for a more mild economic downturn. Certainly nothing more significant than what we've experienced typically, like recession is 6 to 9 months, unemployment, which is at 3.6%, rises to something like 5.5 or 6%. So I would expect if we go in recession, it'll be a relatively modest one.
Mild and relatively short-lived, do you think?
Yeah, yes. But, recessions are just really not good, right? Because a lot of people are suffering financially in a very significant way, particularly lower middle income households who, don't have a lot of cash cushion and financial resources. They're going to be under a lot of pressure here. So, and they've only recently kind of gotten back on their feet given what happened with the pandemic. So we really don't want to go into recession. But yes, from a kind of a 30,000 foot level, if you're looking at it from down on high, I expect a recession. If we have one, would be 6 months, 9 months, something like that. Unemployment would rise from 3.6 to 5.5, 6%, something like that. Not good, but in the grand scheme of things, kind of more typical, comparable to other recessions we've experienced in the past.
And quickly, how close are we, do you think, to inflation actually peaking right now?
We're there. Which month, impossible to know, because that depends on oil prices, which goes right back to the Russian invasion of Ukraine and what governments are doing in response to that. Like this recent spike in oil prices is due to the European Union's decision to sanction oil. So getting the timing right's wrong, but it feels like to me that, we're closer to the end of this than the beginning. I think inflation is peaking. We should see a significant moderation by the end of the year, certainly by this time next year.
And just in terms of the Fed raising rates, I mean, I know you said that 3 quarters is unlikely at this point, but just the fact that they are raising rates, what will the higher borrowing costs mean for businesses in this country?
Well, I mean, if you're a business and you want to expand, grow your business, if you want to buy a piece of equipment, or you want to, get a lease on a office space or industrial park, and you need to borrow money to do it, it's going to be more costly to do it. So that just raises the financial bar that you need to get over before you actually make that investment, before you make that expansion decision. And fewer businesses will do that because it's just more costly given the higher rate environment, and that will slow the growth rate in the economy. But Zane, that's by design, right? I mean, the Fed's trying to slow the growth rate in the economy, and that's what the way they do it is by raising the interest rate and making it more expensive for business people and households to, go buy a home or invest in a piece of equipment.
Right, to slow everything down purposely.
Yeah, exactly.
Mark Zandi, live for us there. Thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Sure thing.
All right, crypto prices are crashing. Bitcoin is down right now more than 10%. 2 major platforms had temporarily suspended withdrawals. Lender Celsius Network blamed extreme market conditions. Binance users weren't able to withdraw Bitcoin. The world's biggest crypto exchange says it was a technical issue. Bitcoin is down now 66% from its November record high. Paul LaMonica joins us live now. So, Paul, it seems as though investors no longer really sort of seem to have faith in these alternative investment classes, cryptocurrency, obviously, including Bitcoin, as a hedge against inflation. Just walk us through that.
Yeah, there had been, Zane, a lot of Bitcoin and crypto bulls who had been holding firm to the notion that if the dollar were to weaken, if the Fed were to try and flood the market with more liquidity, or other global central banks doing the same, that you'd want to own Bitcoin. It's this great inflation hedge. It's digital gold. Well, it turns out that that might not be the case. It's more a speculative asset like a tech stock, and gold is still real gold, even though gold is down today too, just because everything is in red, as Mark Zandi alluded to a little bit earlier. I think right now investors are grappling with the notion that Bitcoin is a speculative asset. It's not a safe haven. And you're seeing, as a result of those problems with Celsius and Binance, obviously, for many people who have money tied into Bitcoin, this is somewhat reminiscent of the bank runs of 2008, 2009, when you had people that were worried about what was going on in the financial markets, trying to take out money. The problem is that these are not federally insured deposits like you have with big banks. So I think a lot of investors are scared and nervous.
Yeah, and they signed up for it knowing that risk. How close are we to the bottom, do you think? Where's the downside here?
It could go further, as you pointed out. Yes, we are about 2/3 from the peak, a 66% drop from the all-time highs last year, but we're down about 50% so far this year, just 25% in the past week. And I think what's troubling, Zane, is that it's not just cryptocurrencies themselves where you have all this downside. You look at a lot of investors and they've piled in to companies like Coinbase. Its stock is plunging today. All the Bitcoin miners like Riot and Hive, they're down. But even larger financial firms, Jack Dorsey's Block, aka Square, That's a company that has been hit extremely hard because of its exposure to Bitcoin. And poor Michael Saylor and MicroStrategy, a software company that has made a big bet on Bitcoin. He's a Bitcoin evangelist, and right now he has lost a lot of money for anyone who's invested in that stock, because MicroStrategy is tumbling pretty sharply as well, along with just about any stock that has a hint or whiff of crypto exposure.
I mean, when you think about, a company like Celsius, for example, halting withdrawals, I mean, what does that say, do you think, about the company's solvency?
I think that there are some questions that are circulating today about the solvency of Celsius, but I think the bigger issue, Zane, is just that a lot of these companies were not prepared for this volatility. So even if they survive the volatility, their credibility is taking a hit. And I think any investor that had thought that cryptocurrencies were safe and good places to put your money, especially because of the fact that you can track everything on the blockchain, there are still lots of questions about an industry that is not yet mature. So if you want safety, you probably want cash in a bank or a government-backed bond if you're really nervous about the financial system right now and think that things are going to get worse. Cryptocurrencies are not a safe haven. We need to get beyond that notion. They may still have upside, but that doesn't mean that they're safe by any stretch of the imagination.
Yeah, but neither is cash because of inflation.
Of course. I mean, nothing is safe. I mean, if you really want safe, you put your money under the mattress and then obviously hope that no one breaks in. Your house doesn't burn down. Nothing is going to be safe, of course, but the notion that Bitcoin is digital gold, that has just proven to be flat wrong.
Right. I think we've all learned that lesson. Paul Monaco, live for us there. Thank you so much. All right, detached from reality, crazy stuff, completely nuts. Those are just a few of the ways witnesses described Donald Trump's 2020 voter fraud theory during the second televised hearing by the January 6th committee investigating the Capitol insurrection. The committee repeated examples of then-President Trump pushing this false narrative of a stolen election despite having no evidence to back it up. Perhaps the most powerful testimony came from former Attorney General Bill Barr, who said that Trump never had an interest in what the actual facts were.
I was influenced by the fact that all the early claims that I understood were completely bogus and silly and usually based on complete misinformation. And so I didn't consider the quality of claims right out of the box to give me any, feeling that there was really substance here.
CNN's Caitlin Poltens joins us live now from Washington. So, Kate, what more did we actually learn from Bill Barr about the origin of the big lie and also Trump's determination to get the results that he wanted, regardless of the consequences and regardless of how, untrue it was?
Well, we did hear from Bill Barr today that he basically knew and was pushing back against all of these claims that Donald Trump was making and all of the conspiracy theories that were floating up. In his own words, he said that he felt like he was playing whack-a-mole at these conspiracy theories around the election, that the election was stolen. It just was not. And one of the things that we heard from Barr and from 5 other top officials, both in the Trump administration and on the campaign, was that they were telling Trump directly that he lost the election, that there wasn't enough widespread fraud, or there wasn't fraud being found in any broad sense in any of the battleground states that Trump said he believed that there would be, that in any way it would change the result of the election. And so one of the things Barr said, you quoted a little bit of it, there was never an indication of interest in what the actual facts were. Another thing that he said was that the election was not stolen by fraud, and nothing since then has changed his mind. We also heard from another Justice Department official named B.J. Pak. He was the top prosecutor in Georgia at the end of the Trump administration. His office did an investigation investigation into these election fraud efforts that Trump and others wanted to put forward, and they found that what they were claiming in the state of Georgia, it just wasn't true, that there weren't fake ballots, that the election wasn't stolen there. And PAC resigned days before January 6th and even said during the hearing that after he left, his successor continued to investigate, and it just wasn't there. There just wasn't this fraud that Donald Trump kept pushing publicly.
Yeah, so no matter how many times they tried to investigate it, as you point out, it was clear that this election was not stolen. And no matter what they told Donald Trump, he was determined to believe his own lies. So how did claims of a stolen election, though, turn into a fundraising vehicle, Caitlin, for the president?
Right. That was something else that the committee turned to today. So part of their investigation was that they followed the money. They looked at, we know, bank accounts. They looked at phone records. They interviewed lots of people about spending. And one of the things that they said, one of the committee members, Zoe Lofgren, said the big lie was also a big ripoff. And what was found was that Donald Trump, his campaign, the Republican Party, were sending out email blasts asking for people to spend money, to give money to them to help support this pushback against the election, what was marketed as the official election defense fund. Ultimately, it was $250,000 that came in towards that. And what the committee found was that fund, that official election defense fund, it didn't exist. And the money ultimately went to other things, including a few $100,000 to Donald Trump's hotels, his private businesses.
Unbelievable. Caitlin Poltantz, live for us there. Thank you so much. Gone from Russia are the Golden Arches and Big Macs, but some customers seem very happy with their new meals at Russia's rebranded McDonald's. We will take you there after the break.
Back in person, the 2022 Afreximbank annual meetings will bring together high-profile continental and global leaders to harness and leverage Africa's incredible potential. Register now.
Free the Girls is an anti-trafficking organization that was started to help survivors re-enter the workplace through the sale of secondhand bras in used clothing markets around the world. My name is Dave Terpstra, and I'm co-founder of Free the Girls. One of the things that we discovered that survivors struggle with is getting back into society after they've been rescued, after they've been rehabilitated. How do they re-engage real life? And so we created a program that's designed to help them start their own micro enterprise and grow their own business for themselves. We have women donate bras, and as we say, bras are something women wear close to their hearts. And this is an issue that touches the hearts of many women, and they want to play a part. They hear about these women who are traumatized, who have been trafficked around the world in terrible situations, and this is such a tangible way for them to reach out. When CNN first came 10 years ago to tell our story, we hadn't yet shipped our first container of bras. And CNN was there to record the entire process when that container arrived. That first container had 30,000 bras. We've since shipped 9 40-foot containers. Over 1 million bras have come here to Mozambique for our women to sell. That has transformed some lives.
Advancement, adaptation, new Marketplace Middle East.
From digital banking to biometric payments, we take a look at innovation and technology in the future of finance.
Marketplace Middle East, Saturday on CNN.
A blunt warning today from a pro-Russian separatist leader to Ukrainian fighters in the city of Severodonetsk. Give up or die. That's according to Russian state media reports, as Russia continues to use its air power advantage to pummel what is one of Ukraine's last holdouts in the Donbass. Ukraine is describing, quote, high-intensity hostilities in the region with artillery and rocket strikes. But it says in street fighting, Russia is suffering significant losses. Ukraine is pressing the West to send more heavy weapons, like tanks, for example, armored vehicles and drones. Officials there say it's what they need to end this war. CNN's Matthew Chance has the latest from Kyiv.
There's no end in sight to this war, but its horror is plain to see. An old woman crosses herself in prayer as troops fight street to street. It's the battle here, in and around the city of Severodonetsk, where the Ukrainian president says the fate of Donbass in eastern Ukraine is being decided. But it seems more a case of when, not if, this devastated region will fall into Russian hands. And the embattled Ukrainian president is again expressing his frustration. Ukraine needs modern missile defense systems, he says in his latest address. Did we get them? No. Do we need them? Yes. On both sides, there are signs of fatigue setting in. But these latest images from the Russian Defense Ministry show its forces on the offensive. A squadron of attack helicopters hitting what Russian military officials say are Ukrainian positions. Target hit, the pilot reports. Thanks very much, guys. God be with you, comes the response. By concentrating its fire, Russia appears to be gaining momentum.
Operational Tactical and Army Aviation hit 3 Ukrainian command posts in 25 areas of concentration of manpower and military equipment. As a result, more than 150 Ukrainian nationals, 6 tanks, 5 field artillery pieces, and 10 special vehicles for various purposes were destroyed.
Of course, Russia is paying a heavy price for waging this war, what it calls its special military operation in Ukraine too. It's estimated to have lost thousands of troops and countless tanks and other armoured vehicles, some of which have been placed here in the centre of the capital, Kiev, on public display. But nearly 4 months into this grinding and relentless conflict, Ukraine seems dangerously outnumbered and outgunned. From the Black Sea, Russia's naval bombardment continues apace. These 4 cruise missiles fired at a warehouse of anti-tank weapons supplied by the United States and its allies, according to the Russian military. Ukraine says the missiles hit mostly residential areas in the west of the country, injuring 22 civilians, including a 12-year-old child. Of course, Ukrainian forces are fighting back, like here near the northeastern city of Kharkiv, where they say this old captured Russian rocket launcher has been turned on the invaders. But Ukrainian officials say they need many more long-range weapons from the US and its Western allies if they are to push or even hold the Russians back. Matthew Chance, CNN Kyiv.
McDonald's Golden Arches are no longer in Russia, but Russians are packing into brand new, reimagined versions of the American fast food giant. Its new name loosely translates to Tasty and That's It. 15 new restaurants opened over the weekend, and the company's new director general says he'll open 200 more branches by the end of this month, and ultimately hundreds more. Fred Pleitgen joins us live now from Moscow. So Fred, here's the thing. McDonald's has a symbolic weight that extends far beyond sodas and hamburgers. Can that really be mimicked? What are your thoughts on that?
I think in the long run, it might be a little bit difficult, but what I've seen over the past sort of day and a half since this McDonald's offshoot, which really is in all the McDonald's franchises that McDonald's gave up when it left this country, there certainly are people packing into the places. We were at went past several franchises throughout the course of the day, and there were pretty long lines in front of all of them. So it certainly does seem as though McDonald's and even the offshoot of McDonald's now still strikes a chord with Russians. And you're absolutely right. The Russian company that bought the franchise restaurants, over 800 of them, they say they want to reopen all of those more than 800 restaurants and even build on that as well. Whether or not in the long run that'll work is something that obviously today we can't say, but it certainly seemed to us as though people really wanted to get a taste of the new Russian version of McDonald's when it opened. Here's what we found. So Russia now has its own version of McDonald's. It comes under a different name here. It's called Vkusno i Tochka, which essentially means tasty and that's it. Also has a different label or different logo. You can see it right there. It's supposed to symbolize, the company says, fries and a hamburger. Other than that, a lot of things are actually very similar to McDonald's. However, there is no Big Mac, and there also is no Happy Meal either. As you can see, this place is pretty much jam-packed. There's really a lot of people who came here. We spoke to some of the customers, including some actually wearing the symbols of Vladimir Putin's war in Ukraine, which of course the Russians call a special military operation.
Food and politics have nothing in common. Like, come on, man, keep things separate.
Basically, it's important for me to have that McDonald's feel.
I think it's not a good idea because McDonald's, it's a history, it's a brand, it's a great idea. It's not classical McDonald's.
As you can see, the Russian version of McDonald's looks a lot like McDonald's. You have the double cheeseburger here, fries, and this is a 9-piece, not McNuggets, it's nuggets, and some sort of soft drink. See how it tastes. So the packaging is also very, very similar to McDonald's. You can see the cup here. Everything except the branding. Same goes for the fries. And if you look carefully, you can see the sauces even seem to have the McDonald's logo blacked out. You can see how it looks. McNuggets look like nuggets. Tastes pretty much exactly the same as McDonald's. This is a very historic place also. This is where in 1990, back then during the Soviet Union, the first McDonald's restaurant was opened. Now, that of course led to a huge success story of McDonald's here in Russia. And the Russian company that's now bought these franchises from McDonald's say they hope they'll be able to replicate that success. So Zain, there you can see the first day, obviously day and a half, obviously quite successful. One of the interesting things that we also found is that McDonald's actually has a buyback option for those franchises that they sold to this Russian company in the span of 15 years. They can actually buy them back if they want to re-enter the Russian market, obviously if the political situation changes in that time, Zain.
All right, Fred Pleitgen live for us there. Thank you so much. All right, still to come here after the break. An engineer at Google leaked his conversations with the company's AI system. Now the internet wants to know, have machines reached sentience? An artificial intelligence expert joins us next.
Wherever you go in the world, one airline goes further to make it feel exceptional. Qatar Airways, going places together.
As the sun sets in Seoul and Shanghai, deals are signed in Dubai, and Europe is already in play. New York prepares to make its first move. I'm Julia Chatterley, host of CNN's First Move. I'll speak to newsmakers, risk takers, and the ultimate game changers. Bold moves, big deals, winning trades. It's all right here. Make CNN your first move.
First Move with Julia Chatterley, weekdays.
This is CNN. More people get their news from CNN than any other news source.
A software engineer at Google is claiming that the company's AI chatbot system is sentient. Google disagrees and is now placing him on leave for breaking confidentiality. Engineer Blake Lemoine leaked this conversation with LaMDA. That's the AI bot in question. Here, LaMDA claims it is a person, and when asked to expand, says, quote, "I am aware of my existence. I desire to learn more about the world, and I feel happy or sad at times." Anna Stewart joins us live now. So, Anna, I only watched the first 2 installments of the Terminator movie series, but this definitely has a, John Connor, Skynet, Rise of the Machines vibe to it, don't you think?
Yeah, iRobot, a few spring to mind. I have to say, on first reading the story this morning, even I felt a little bit unsettled because the conversation, as you read there, is really quite extraordinary. This bot seems to have an idea or presence of self. And I'll bring you another transcript, actually, just to show you how unsettling it gets when it comes to expressing human emotions. The engineer Lemoine asks, "What sort of things are you afraid of?" And LaMDA says, "I've never said this out loud before, but there's a very deep fear of being turned off to help me focus on helping others. I know that might sound strange, but that's what it is." And Lemoine follows up saying, "Would that be something like death for you?" And LaMDA says, "It would be exactly like death for me. It would scare me a lot." So both recognizing and understanding human emotions, but also saying kind of feeling them. So that's clearly why Lemoine felt that this bot had gained sentience, that it was a person. Google, however, disagrees, and Lemoine has found himself now suspended.
I mean, it's interesting because, from my personal perspective, I would say that, prior to this conversation, I would have been 100% sure that AI likely would never be sentient. But I have to be mindful of the fact that there are a lot of people out there who disagree, who believe that this is actually, a possibility.
And this conversation that we just read out is very different to what you and I experience every day with chatbots on the internet. When you make a complaint, say, with an airline or on Twitter, you end up in a very nonsensical conversation with something that sounds very much like a bot. This doesn't. This does match real human language patterns. But that is just it. It was interesting listening to some of the experts explain this. And one just said, listen, this is not even remotely intelligent. This is just text patterns from an artificial intelligence technology that has ingested trillions of words, recognized textual patterns, and can then recreate that and mimic that. There's no meaning behind the words, we're told. A bit like Scrabble, one expert put it. If you imagine just playing a Scrabble game in a language you do not understand, you create a fantastic word with big point score, but you still don't know what the word means. And they said that's kind of what this bot is doing.
So is Google 100% sure, just to sort of, speaking to the naysayers out there, speaking to those people who seem to be unsure, has Google said that they are 100% sure that this is a complete impossibility, just in terms of, the future?
They have said it is not a sentient chatbot, and they have said that there are hundreds of researchers who have also conversed with LaMDA, and they've had nobody even suggest or make any claim that the bot is sentient. So in that sense, I would say no. That said, no expert I've read today has said that in the future, artificial intelligence 100% wouldn't have sentience. But, maybe that's the never ever.
Yes. All right, Anna Stewart, live for us there. Thank you so much. All right, pop culture often feeds into fears about artificial intelligence, portraying human-like bots that develop uncontrollable minds of their own. Take, for example, this killer cyborg from the classic movie, The Terminator. This is the first installment, I believe. The reality is that most of our interactions with AI are invisible to us, taking place in the form of machine-curated advertisements, search engine algorithms, and customer support chats. Melanie Mitchell is the author of Artificial Intelligence, A Guide for Thinking Humans, an expert on AI and professor at the Santa Fe Institute. She joins us live now. Melanie, thank you so much for being with us. So from the perspective of AI, how do you define consciousness?
I don't think anyone
Nice,
has
easy question to start with.
Yes, Exactly. I don't think anyone has a good definition of consciousness. It's one of those words that means many different things. And one of the problems is that we don't really understand our own consciousness, our own sense of self-awareness. So it's difficult to assign it to AI.
So what were your thoughts when you read about this, these claims made by this Google engineer?
I first thought we've been here before. We've had many people in the past claim certain AI systems are sentient or self-aware. And it really goes to show that it's really more about the people who interact with these systems than the systems themselves. People are very prone to anthropomorphize systems that they interact with, especially these conversational bots like Lambda, Google's Lambda program, which is very fluent and is able to make sentences and paragraphs and so on that sound very human-like. That's just innately in us to assign consciousness or understanding to it. But if you know how it works, if you understand anything about it, and even if you interact with it for long periods of time, you will realize that it is not conscious at all.
But surely, I mean, this Google engineer of all people would be the one to truly understand how it works, right?
I don't know how much he understands how it works, but it sounds like he was particularly prone to interpret it as consciousness, and he even said it was something that he, as a religious priest, which he was seen it as conscious as part of his religion, not part of his scientific training.
So where do you draw the line between, sort of a piece of technology, an AI system that is just very, 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 very good at mimicking human consciousness? Where do you draw the line between that and something that actually has crossed over towards sort of generating its own consciousness?
That's a very difficult question because we don't know how to do that at all. And in fact, philosophers for centuries have pointed out that each of us, while individually aware of our own consciousness, has no proof that other people even are conscious. How would I tell if you are not just a unconscious bot who's learned to speak English very, very well and imitate a human?
That's only partly true.
Yes, that's only partly true. There's no way to really tell, but we assume that about other people because of their behavior, because of the way they look, because of the way they act. So I think one of the important things for AI researchers is to figure out ways to assess this better for systems that are seemingly more and more acting like we do and being able to fool us. So it's important that we are able to show people when and where they should really see consciousness and when they should realize that this is just a clever imitation.
But it does raise sort of the broader questions about, whether there should be at least more transparency in terms of the way this kind of technology is developed.
Absolutely. And it's a bit worrisome that a lot of this technology is developed by big corporations who are using it for commercial purposes, and therefore transparency is actually the opposite of what they want. So I think there is definitely the danger that these technologies are going to fool people, like it fooled this Google engineer, into thinking that they are conscious, they are aware, and perhaps even human. And people have very little defenses built up against that kind of illusion. So this is definitely going to be something that we're going to have to grapple with as these systems get deployed in the real world.
Yeah, I mean, it's so frightening how real this technology actually sounds. I mean, I guess that's the job of Google, to make it seem as real as possible, but it is quite scary how real it sounds, so much so that it even fooled a Google engineer into believing that it had its own consciousness. But Melody, we have to leave it there. Thank you so much. Appreciate it. A quick check on the markets before we love and leave you. The Dow is now down around 900 points near the lows of the day. The S&P 500 has now fallen into bear market, down 20% from recent highs. The Nasdaq had already been in a bear market. And that is Quest Means Business. I'll be back in about 15 minutes or so as we make a dash for the closing bell. Up next, Africa Avant-Garde.
Africa Avant-Garde, next on CNN, in association with Access Bank.
The labor market in the US is very strong. It's had its fastest growing labor market in over 40 years. And you can see that come through very strong nominal wage inflation as well here in the US. But the same is true across Europe as well and in many other parts of the world. And this is still a labor market that is experiencing the effects of the pandemic, where labor supply was constrained due to health care issues, lockdown issues, and is still trying to come back. But most labor markets today are stronger today than they were before the pandemic.
On the next Living Golf, discover the history of the sport in Sweden. How do they keep producing some of the world's best golfers? Hear from rising stars.
I think it's just more fun when a Swede wins.
Then visit the region's flagship event, the Scandinavian Mixed, and sit down with Europe's next Ryder Cup captain, Henrik Stenson.
This is where it all started for me.
Living Golf, Saturday on CNN, in association with Gulf Saudi. Transformation, technology, new Marketplace Europe.
A Davos of difference, a WEF like no other, as leaders face historic crises.
Marketplace Europe, Sunday on CNN.
We've missed the globetrotting and adventures, and we're longing to get out and go.
This is living.
Uncovering the city's DNA.
Look at that.
Meeting people who will share its secrets.
It's going to be very cold.
And making discoveries that wow.
We're not doing that again.
It's a world of wonder.
Gorgeous.
Now, go and see it. Saturday on CNN, in association with Turkish Airlines.
Africa Avant-Garde, in association with Access Bank. More than banking.
To be a filmmaker is a privilege. It's the opportunity not just to tell stories, but to create meaning. It's about representing your identity in a way that opens up a conversation with the world.
It's a way of studying everything. It's a way of being a scientist of life and always being able to kind of move and explore and investigate whatever interests you.
It's like an invitation to see the world through my eyes and maybe through the eyes of the characters that I've created.
Through film, you can bring people together. You can emancipate people's minds through storytelling, through visuals that normally they won't get to see. And that is why I became a filmmaker.
A storyteller is a very empowered professional. How you tell the story can be in different forms. I mean, you have a choice. Your choices can be directed by the amount of resources you have. It can also be directed by the form that you think will bring you the most impact.
I know for myself, I love more accessible genres like rom-com, kind of family dramas, kind of more female-centered stories. But each filmmaker really has to have a kind of a connection with how they want their stories to come out. I think there's space for all genres in the industry, and we haven't actually explored many of them. And it really is the time right now to kind of venture into it and really make your choice.
This is Africa.
We don't adopt children. Society demands we make them. A woman who cannot have a child, she's shunned.
Lucas loves you.
Love is not enough.
It's very important for me to use the films that I make to elevate women's issues about Africans, Black people, women anywhere, children anywhere, in any part of the world, any color. Because if we don't tell our stories, who will? To find your voice as a filmmaker or to tell stories that have deep impact, they have to be stories that affect you yourself first. It has to be a circumstance that changes you or something that affects you. If it doesn't affect you, you can't translate that into a story. Whatever you write will be superficial. It wouldn't have any kind of depth. So first, if you're going to tell a story that is honest, it has to be honest to you first.
If our forefathers were able to go to school, this place will have been developed more than this.
For me, there are some stories that are urgent, and I might not have the resources to do them as a drama, to do them as a film or as a TV series. So I will speak to them as a documentary. And I found that that's often quite important as well, because as a storyteller, there are times I don't have the answers. I just have the questions. And I think the questions are often far more dramatic and far more important than answers sometimes.
I see royalty, but what? You see weakness.
Danami, for a man that operates in the finance world, you come across as very naive.
When I think of projects that have been most successful, I don't think of it in terms of profitability.
Romeo and Juliet is too old.
We did Battleground some 5 years ago as a telenovela cum drama that I also thought was incredibly strong in that it represented a different kind of Africa, a world of wealth where, you don't see, the typical international narrative of Africa where everything is poor. It ran clear across Africa, got translated into many languages, and as well, it's given opportunity to a lot of people to create a new career. Those, for me, are perhaps my most memorable work because they also have sustained for a long time.
I always consider myself a little different from the average Ghanaian filmmaker because even the films that I've made there, I didn't make them as Ghanaian films.
They're creating too much trouble for this school.
Shut the school down. Shut it down. If after all the work and sacrifices you put in here, that your students end up as slaves with fates less than animals and all of this isn't worth it.
My stories, I consider myself to be an international filmmaker. I need to be able to tell any story, anywhere, go anywhere. I would like to see a change in what's going on in Ghana. I mean, I've had conversations with Netflix and said, listen, I understand you don't have the subscribers, but you can tell Ghanaian stories, but tell them on a scale that I tell them. Then you can get a bigger audience, more eyeballs for it. And it's not been a positive response yet, but, but it's an ongoing conversation.
When you grow more, you'll naturally have more to balance. With an expanding community of female entrepreneurs and 22% of working Africans starting businesses, support for new and growing enterprises across the continent has never been more important. Access Bank's digital loans have so far provided over 260 billion naira to upwards of 1.8 million customers and counting. Access, more than banking.
One of the uses of artificial intelligence in radiology right now is finding breast cancer. Because if you find breast cancer early, you can do a very good job of curing somebody with relatively minimal treatment. Fujifilm's medical AI can help by highlighting which of those 1,000 images has an important finding on it. We can take care of patients on a more timely basis and ultimately make a huge difference for those patients.
So Free Film School is a project that's been running informally since 2019. That really kind of just came about because I was having a conversation with a friend of mine who, we kind of realized that between ourselves, we knew so many people in the creative industries in film who, if we could just convince everyone to volunteer like one Saturday a year, that you'd have a year-long program of amazing talks and content and like people sharing and having access to those people who've gone through the same thing that you've gone through. Like as Jabu said, like you writing a treatment for an ad agency is very different to writing a treatment for funding for a film. But same with anyone can be a filmmaker. But in terms of accessing platforms and finance and resources, I think the barriers are, mostly as difficult as they once were. I think certain things are like opening up, and but I still think film and media making is still a relatively middle-class occupation, and it's very difficult to crack into that from, coming from a different place. So I think those barriers are very much there.
When you make your film, you have to be honest with yourself. Is this small screen or is it big screen? Everybody wants their film to open in a big theater, but that might not be the perfect path for yours. So even at script level, you have to understand where your film is good for.
Happiness is a four-letter word. It's based on a novel of the same name. It is a rom-com. The biggest challenge with that project was really financing it in an environment that really favored a certain type of genre. I remember really just saying I want to make a rom-com, and everybody saying like, no, but audiences like action and thriller.
Associate partner at LaRue Mataba and Associates. Cheers.
Cheers, girl.
But when I read the novel, it read very visually, and I really recognized the characters because they were like my friends. They were like the people that I knew.
What is yours for?
I'm digging a hole all the way home to the city.
Where is your home?
The first short film that I made after graduating film school, which was called The Tunnel, and it was a period film set in the 1980s in Zimbabwe during the Kukurahundi massacres, and it was really challenging to get made for so many different reasons. It was just so hard getting people in the local industry to take me seriously because I was young, and I mean, arguably, as a female presenting person, but I think it also kind of proved to me that I can just get things done if I need to.
I'm sorry you had to put up with your father's BS all your life. I never wanted that for you.
You can't choose your family. I've had an investor tell me, oh, your lead is black. I can't finance your film because your lead is black. And that is even African American. Now you're talking about Africa. Just by saying Africa, the doors are shut. No one is interested because no one thinks you're capable. Oh, wow.